So hello and welcome to a Spotlight on Faith, where we investigate how faith inspires people to do great things. My name is Carrie Alderton, and usually I'm behind the screen as the producer of EIFA's shows, but today I'm very excited to be on the front of the camera interviewing Sydney Switzer. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can you start off by telling me a little bit about what you've noticed might be the differences between the Jewish community where you grew up and in Scotland?
Right, so there's actually a lot of similarities between where I grew up in Calgary, Canada, and the Jewish community here in Glasgow. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to live in so many different Jewish communities. I lived in Vancouver, I lived in different cities in Israel, I spent 2 years in Mumbai, India. So I've seen a lot of different Jewish communities, and in a lot of ways, Glasgow is not so different. They're both quite small. Calgary is definitely bigger than Glasgow, but they're both quite small communities. They have larger communities close enough but far enough away that you can see some of the things but not totally gain. So in Calgary, we're decently close to Toronto. I mean, it's a 3-hour flight, but that's that's Canada.
Yeah.
And in Glasgow, we're close enough to London that sometimes people from London come up and lead programs, but it is far enough away and distinct enough that it's definitely its own community. They're both very warm communities. They're both very lovely communities. There's different things going on, but they both have like several institutions which are really integral to Jewish communities. So there's a school here in Glasgow. There are a few different synagogues to choose from. There is a Jewish community center where there's different offices of Jewish organizations. So there's quite a few things that are similar. Obviously there's differences in the communities, but what's really special for me is being able to pop into a community, whether that's Mumbai or Glasgow, and like knowing what's going on. Like, I know the prayers, I know the holidays, I know the celebrations, and that's really helped me settle in Scotland, is having those similarities and those familiarities.
Absolutely. I can imagine that must be wonderful, knowing that you're going to get a similar experience around the world and a similar feeling of welcoming. That's really fantastic. So what I'm hearing, I guess, is that there are always these core activities or core sort of cultural centres or cultural activities that the Jewish community tends to organise around the world. I'd like it if you could tell me what you think might be unique, what you love about the Glasgow Jewish community.
What do I love about the Glasgow Jewish community? So, I mean, there's a lot of things, but things that I think are really unique. So there's definitely like the Scottish flair going on. So we had a burn supper, which was for me a very exciting opportunity. And we had kosher haggis and we had, there's a very special ode to the haggis that's done in Yiddish. And so, I mean, I couldn't understand it anyway with the accent. So it was hard for me to pick out what was the English and what was the Yiddish, but there's parts going on in Yiddish and there's parts going on in, it's really interesting how these Jewish communities like adapt certain rituals. That was really special. One thing that I really appreciated is just the warmth of everybody and how everybody comes together. So one special thing about Jewish communities is that many Jews choose not to drive on Shabbat as a way of like observing the Sabbath. So from Friday night at sunset until Saturday at nightfall, not everybody, but a lot of communities will choose to turn off their phones and not to drive, which means that a lot of us are living within walking distance of the synagogue, which has been so nice, especially during lockdown. Absolutely. That everybody, like I can go on my daily walk around the neighborhood and see just tons of community members that I know, and that's so special, like living in sort of like a tight-knit community like that, which is not something I've ever experienced elsewhere. Because I've always lived further away, and in Glasgow everything is so compact and so together, which is really nice.
That is really wonderful. And it must have been a fantastic experience during lockdown, especially when so many people felt really disconnected.
Lockdown, we've had some amazing Jewish community projects. So I'm the youth coordinator for the Scottish Jewish community.
I'd love it if you could tell me more about the projects that you've got going on in Glasgow.
Yeah, so we've had some amazing, amazing things. And obviously it's been hard not to be able to do our usual programming. So usually I'm in several schools, primary schools, secondary schools, running assemblies, running lunch clubs, having youth groups. Right before lockdown, like the day before before we got really serious about lockdown, was we had a movie night in the synagogue basement, and all of the kids came and we watched The Prince of Egypt getting ready for Passover, a classic.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I've missed those programs, but we've done some really, really amazing programs through lockdown. So we're running this camp right now. We have huge numbers that are amazing, and every week the kids get a package delivered to them with a camp shirt and supplies, and then we have these Zoom calls, and we have a Facebook group, and all the parents are posting photos, and it's been a really amazing method of bringing in new voices and new people and engaging with the kids and having the kids engage with each other, and also the parents, having some parents who maybe felt a bit out of the main bubble and bringing them in. We had a live cheesecake baking.
Do you think that's because of Zoom calls, people feeling like they can join services where they wouldn't have before, or is it because it's for young people and then parents get interested?
Yeah, I think both of those things. I think it's an interesting thing with Zoom calls because it's easier to just pop onto a Zoom call when you wouldn't necessarily want to walk into a new space. You know, like it's less social pressure, it's less uncomfortable. So that's been really interesting. But I think part of it is also about location. So the Glasgow community is really based on the south side of Glasgow, but especially a lot of new families and younger families live in town. And it's sometimes hard for them to come out. We also have a few families in Edinburgh and families in Aberdeen, and for them it's a lot easier. Yeah. Although there are synagogues in Edinburgh and Aberdeen as well. But I think it's really brought together all of the Scottish communities and helped us connect with people, which is really lovely.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. So sorry, please continue. What other projects do you have going on?
Yeah, so we did something for the holiday of Shavuot, which happened just at the end of June. That's the holiday where we celebrate receiving the 10 Commandments. And this was the first sort of delivery we did. Up until then, everything had been on Zoom. And for Shavuot, we said, no, we're going to get physical things and we're going to go to the kids. And for me, this was my first time seeing the kids. So I don't have a car, so I only did the kids that I could walk to. Yeah. And just walking between all of these houses and seeing these kids, obviously from a safe distance, seeing how excited they were. One girl, I remember she opened the door and she found these stickers in her pack, and just like the excitement of outside contact and physical stickers, she was so excited. And it was just so, for me to see that reaction and see the impact of the work that we're doing was so good. Yeah, we've been working with the schools also, because the schools have some limitations in terms of Zoom and this. So we've been picking up for, especially with the Jewish school, like working with them to do holiday programming. I have my guitar and I sit and we sing songs for Shabbat every Friday morning, which they usually would have done in school. So it's quite nice.
Oh, that's wonderful. So everyone sings along over Zoom.
Yes, on mute usually. But at the end of every session, everybody unmutes themselves and sings along, and you get that delay, and it sounds horrible, but it sounds so good to hear everybody's voices together.
Yeah, it must be lovely to get that feeling. We did an interview a few weeks ago with an imam called Imam Hassan Rabbani, who also practices in Glasgow, and he was telling us about how each week he dresses up in a bear costume and sings to the young people in his congregation over Zoom.
There's an idea. I should do that. But now that I'm up on the farm, I'm volunteering on a farm in the Highlands, and so usually when I do that call, I try and bring a farm surprise. So one week we had the sheep. The farmer brought the sheep and put him directly on my lap in front of the Zoom camera, and we had Shabbat with the sheep. It was very fun.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Especially, I guess, as people probably have much less of a connection to the outside and to nature at the moment. So good to get that. It's just over Zoom.
Yeah, nature is such a core integral part of so many faiths, right? Like Judaism was based on agriculture. It was based at a time when people were farming and people were living on the land. And so many of the practices that we follow today, if not directly dealing with land, are based off of dealing with the land. And so it's been, for me, as an educational process, and also what I'm trying to do with the children, is to like look at these practices that we have and say, okay, like we're based on agriculture, and today we're living in a city. So how can we look at this and use these tools to sort of renew our own spiritual practices?
Absolutely, and that's especially poignant, I think, during this time as we're seeing air pollution clearing and people maybe starting a different conversation about the climate crisis, hopefully. And well, that sort of links me back to what my next question is going to be, and what you were saying before probably maybe goes against what some people are assuming, in that people are coming away from their faith during this time. It seems that actually the pandemic has been a really fantastic time for people to reconnect and to connect with other communities. And also now we're starting this conversation about climate change. And it seems to me that a lot of young people want to change the way that we view the climate. And that is often what people who are young gather in terms of what they want to see the world, what they want in the world to change. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think young people, from your experience with the people you work with, what do you think young people want to see change the most?
In terms of the world, or in terms of their Jewish practices, or both?
In terms of the world, like for example, if a young person was coming to one of Edinburgh Interfaith Association's events, and some of our older members said to them, what changes can we make so that your life is going to be better in the future? What do you think young people really want to see change the most?
Right. It's a hard question, right?
It's
something that we see. So with this camp, we're running this leadership program, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a bunch of students who are finishing S2 and S3, and we've given them a ton of responsibility. So we're saying to them, plan programs and run Zoom sessions and make activities that we can send to the kids. And some people were a little bit hesitant. Is it gonna work? I don't know. They're quite young. Is it you know? And we've seen them do amazing things with these programs, and seen them make so many interesting and fascinating programs. And I think that it's really inspired me to really give them those opportunities to make those changes. And so we see people, if you go to like your average synagogue service pre-COVID, how many young people are there? 1, 2, 3, maybe, if we're really, really lucky. and we're not seeing people in traditional spaces. And I think that finding alternative spaces is something that's really exciting for these kids, because you see them using all sorts of different spaces, whether that's TikTok, everybody's favorite TikTok, or you know, different online spaces, different alternative spaces, outdoor spaces. This is something we spoke about yesterday in the panel about the importance of religious spaces like a synagogue or a mosque or a church, as opposed to any other space. I think that looking at those alternative spaces is a really interesting way to bring people in. So with the younger kids, not the teenagers, we've been trying to have alternative programs. Like we went to Flip Out, the trampoline park, and we did Havdalah, which is this beautiful weekly ceremony where we close Shabbat and we have candles and spices. It's a lovely ceremony, and we combined it with a trip to Flip Out. So it's giving people like an alternative space. We're not going to go to synagogue and pray. We're going to go trampolining and integrate our Jewish practices into that.
Yeah. And how exciting. So then how does that work when it's on Snapchat or another social media site? How do you think you can combine the fun and the faith and reach young people that way?
That's the challenge. That's the challenge that we're working through. Yeah, and I don't know if I have an answer. For that. I've seen this amazing group done by a group in Berlin where they have a weekly group. I'm not quite sure what the app is. But they have this app that they're using, and every week they post a bit of the weekly Torah portion. Every week we have a cycle of 52 weeks. Maybe it's not 52, maybe it's a little bit more, the Jewish calendar, but we have this cycle of the Torah portions, and they post a little bit of each weekly portion, and then people respond to it by making art, and then they have this group that everything is coming through, and people are responding through their app instead of through like a traditional meeting, or even an email thread or a WhatsApp thread, which now is like outdated. Nobody checks their email these days. So yeah, I think that finding ways to really bringing the content is very important. I don't think that we should, it's a tough balance to find the line between bringing the content and finding these interesting and new and engaging methods. And I think when we find that, then it's like the sweet spot of great innovative programming.
Absolutely. That's really exciting. I'm wondering, seeing as this is a really fascinating discussion we're having, I'm wondering if you could clarify for me a little bit more the relationship in Judaism to shul, to synagogue, to the physical building, and how that might look different to other faiths.
Yeah, so it's hard because synagogues, there's so many different types of synagogues and so many different places. So when I grew up, I was speaking about this with my mom last night. When I grew up, the synagogue that my parents went to and that I went to didn't have a physical building. And so we were renting space from the Jewish Community Center, but it was a multi-purpose room. And when it wasn't Friday night, the room was used for summer camps and meetings and luncheons and whatever. It was just a room. And Judaism is quite unique in that way, that a synagogue is important, but there are things that are more important. So certain things that are more important than a synagogue might be this mikveh, this ritual bath, which is used for all sorts of different purposes in Jewish life. Schools are considered really important. And the synagogue building is like, yeah, it's important, but it's not the key. It's not the center, and you can pray anywhere. So when you're on the bus in Israel, if it hits that time right before sunset, the bus will stop for a break, and everybody will get off, and everybody, if there's over 10 people, they'll be praying on the side of the road. Yeah. Because it's not about the physical building, it's about the rituals and the community and what's going on in those spaces. So we see that synagogues are important, and here in Glasgow we have 4 synagogues, and they've all got physical buildings, and they all have services. They have some programs that go on in their buildings, but I think that thinking of ways to innovate and use alternative spaces and use spaces in different ways is really important.
Absolutely, and I think that that's a really fascinating distinction as well, because I think a lot of people would assume if we're not using religious buildings as much, then we're losing religious community. Whereas what you're telling me is that in Judaism, there's so much more about the way that we educate each other, the way that we form community, that doesn't necessarily have to be in synagogue. And that's maybe what could adapt and continue. And you're already doing great work in that area.
So many Jewish rituals are home-based, they take place in the home, and for Shabbat, Friday night and Saturday morning, yes, you can go to the synagogue. Probably in Glasgow, if you think of all the people that go to synagogue Friday night, I would say maybe 30 on a good week, maybe a few more people that are in all of those 4 synagogues on a Friday night. Whereas the number of people that are celebrating Shabbat in their homes with their families, lighting Shabbat candles, making kiddush on the wine, eating challah, celebrating with their families is hugely more than that. And that's what's really, really important, is the way that we celebrate, and a lot of that takes place in the home.
Fantastic. Well, considering this and everything we've been talking about, I have one last question for you. And again, it's not a small one. What do you think faith will look like in Scotland in 2030?
I have an answer to that. I'm not sure what faith will look like in Scotland in the coming months going on. There's so many changes in the world, and I think this panel that we had yesterday was really inspiring to see all of the different people of different faiths coming together and answering questions. And I think this awareness of other faiths is really interesting. So one thing that I generally do is run Jewish assemblies at secondary schools across Glasgow, and they have options. They can go to Jewish assembly or Christian assembly or Muslim assembly, and they're encouraged to try out different assemblies. So it's not just if you're Jewish, you go to Jewish assembly. Most of the people who come to Jewish assembly are not Jewish. Yeah. And you see different people cycling through every week, and that's really inspiring to see people learning about different faiths, people learning about different practices. And so I think that going forward up to 2030, that's a long time in the future. Yes. There will be a larger awareness of different practices, and perhaps not integration, but working together and building community through different understandings of the world, and learning about different faiths, and also learning about our own faiths is really key to understanding those different aspects of society.
Absolutely. So a more diverse Scotland, where we celebrate all of the amazing cultures that exist there, and celebrate people like you who do fantastic work. And I hope that with people like you working in Scotland, I'm sure we're going to get there even sooner than 2030. Fingers crossed. So thank you so much for joining me today and for telling me more about your work, Sydney. It was really a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been so lovely, and thank you for all the work you guys are doing.